Joshua Van will challenge Alexandre Pantoja.
UFC 323, the co-main event, Pantoja defends his flyweight belt against the #1 contender, Josh Van. He seemed to explode out of nowhere and is already looking for his 5th win in under a year to earn that title fight.
The fight start right there, you know, seeing the eyes of my opponent. I think he's represent all this new generation, you know, and make me a lot of motivation to fight with him. We're gonna close this chapter. I know 100% I'm gonna finish the fight.
Pantoja, he is one of the finest mixed martial artists that's ever stepped into the octagon.
He did a lot of great things in our division, but you know, this is my time. Gotta get that belt from him.
Joshua Van now showing he is on the level of the #1 contender.
UFC 323, I'll knock out Pantoja inside 3 rounds.
Pantoja vs Van are set for the co-main event of UFC 323, and although a lot of fans think that Pantoja is going to run through Van, I'm here to tell you that Van poses a real threat to Pantoja's reign. But quickly, before we get the video started, my name is JuicyMMA, I make opinionated MMA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, as only 10% of you watching are actually subscribed. And also, if you guys want to support the channel even more, be sure to hit that join button. For members only videos, live streams, best bets, discounted merch, and all of this starts at a low price of just 99 cents. But anyways, let's get into it. When you talk about a lot of ranked fighters today, and especially a lot of champions today, a big complaint that a lot of MMA fans have about these fighters is they're just not active enough. They either fight once or maybe twice in a particular year, but usually nothing more than twice per year. But when you talk about Joshua Van, he's the complete opposite, and he's been ridiculously active. When you compare Van against somebody that he just lost to not too long ago in Charles Johnson, their careers could not be more different. For Charles, he's not even all that inactive, but currently at this point, he's at the bottom half of the flyweight rankings. And of course, when you talk about Joshua Van, he's fighting for the belt this weekend at UFC 323. And a big reason for why Van has been able to get to this point is obviously he's successful, he's been able to get some really high profile wins, but at the same time, he's been ridiculously active. And this is something that Dana White has talked about a lot in the past. But he essentially rewards guys that want to be super active. And if you're able to be super active, and of course, most importantly, you're able to get the victories, you are going to get catapulted to big situations, and of course in this case you are going to get a title shot a lot quicker. But another question that some of you may be wondering at this point is, what specifically does Joshua Van do out there that has made him so successful thus far? Well, in my opinion, it comes down to a couple different factors, but the first and most obvious factor is his striking. When you watch Van strike out there, everything is always perfect. His hands are exactly where they need to be, he never overextends, he has great technique on all the shots that he throws, and he just has a great understanding overall of striking. Because earlier on in his UFC career, he did a really good job at pressuring opponents, putting volume on them, and eventually at times finding finishes. But ever since his UFC career has progressed, he's added another wrinkle to his striking game, as at this point he does a much better job at staying a little bit more patient and finding those counter shot opportunities. We saw it in his fight against Brendan Rival, we saw it in a couple of his previous fights as well, and at this point Van has a really good ability to both fight on the front foot as well as fight off the back foot as well and find those big counter shots. Now, does Van have the most power on the feet? No, he does not. But because he is so technical and because he has a really good ability to fight on the front foot as well as fight off the back foot, he's a very effective striker. But the next factor for why I think Joshua Van has been able to be so successful thus far is due to his takedown defense. Because obviously a lot of his opponents going into a fight against Joshua Van probably want to take the fight to the ground. Because if the fight stays on the feet, Van is probably going to be more technical than most, if not all, of his opponents, and he's probably going to piece you up on the feet. But because Joshua Van has such great takedown defense, he kind of forces the fights to usually be on the feet, and because of that, he's been able to be super successful. But another question that some of you may be wondering at this point is, why specifically do I think Joshua Van is going to challenge Alexandre Pantoja? Well, in my opinion, this comes down to a couple different factors, but the first factor I want to touch upon is the striking. Because as I mentioned before, most guys that go up against Joshua Van are going to have trouble fighting him on the feet, as I said before, because because he is so versatile. He can fight off the back foot as well as off the front foot. But in this particular fight against Pantoja, I think Van is probably going to be on the back foot for the majority of it. Pantoja has always been a fighter that's been ridiculously aggressive, and because of that, I do think there is going to be a lot of counter shot opportunities. We've seen guys like Steve Erceg and other fighters as well have some success counter striking against Pantoja, and I do think a guy like Joshua Van, the skill level of a guy like Joshua Van, is going to have a field day with landing some nice counter shots on Alexandre Pantoja. And the thing is, if Van is able to land some nice counter shots over the course of a full 5-round fight, maybe not initially he'll hurt Pantoja or finish him, but over the course of a full 5-round fight, if Pantoja is consistently running into big right hands or big left hooks from Joshua Van, I wouldn't be totally shocked if Van was able to find a finish. Obviously, Pantoja has an amazing chin. Obviously, Van doesn't hit the hardest, although it does seem like his power is a little bit better now compared to what it used to be, but of course, at the end of the day, he still doesn't hit all that hard. But when you're talking about a fighter consistently running into big shots, big right hands, big left hooks over the course of a full 5-round fight, I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if Van was able to find a finish. But the next reason for why I think Joshua Van is going to challenge Alexandre Pantoja is due to his takedown defense. Because at this point, what Pantoja really likes to do is land body kicks on the feet, pressure you on the feet until he can get you alongside the cage and shoot in for a takedown. And if he is able to find a takedown on any one of his opponents, he's most likely going to submit them. And if he is able to find a takedown on Joshua Van, I don't think it would go great for Van, but Joshua Van has shown a really good ability to stop takedowns. And if he can stop takedowns and keep the fight on the feet, as I mentioned before, I do think he is going to have a lot of success on the feet. So I do think his takedown defense is going to be a huge factor in this particular fight. So if I was in the corner of Joshua Van, my game plan going into this fight would be to mix it up on the feet. At times, he can be a little bit more patient and essentially force Pantoja to come to him, and at that point, he would definitely be able to find some big counter shot opportunities. But at the same time, you don't want to be on your back foot for the whole fight, because the longer that you are on your back foot during the fight, the higher possibility or the higher chance Pantoja would eventually be able to find a takedown. So I would definitely say mix it up. Stay in the back foot and stay a little bit patient to find those big counter shot opportunities, but at the same time, pressure Pantoja in certain moments as well. And of course, most importantly, avoid the takedown at all costs. If this fight does go to the ground, I don't think it's going to go all that well for Joshua Van. So as long as he can keep the fight on the feet, I do think he will have success. But with all that being said, if I had to give my official prediction for this matchup, I still would slightly lean with Alexandre Pantoja via a submission. I still think Van has a real chance to win this fight, but if I had to give my official prediction, I do slightly lean with Pantoja. And the reason for why I lean with him slightly comes down to two separate factors. The first factor is the jiu-jitsu threat, because as I mentioned before, Van does a really good job at stopping takedowns and keeping the fight on the feet. But over the course of a full 5-round fight, it's going to be difficult to stop literally every single takedown from Pantoja. And if the fight does eventually go to the ground, especially if it does go to the ground for an extended period of time, I think it's going to be very difficult for Van to survive on the ground versus Pantoja, because I personally consider Pantoja to be the best or one of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners in the entire sport. And although Joshua Van isn't bad on the ground, he doesn't have bad jiu-jitsu, it's just at a different level compared to Pantoja. But the other factor for why I think this fight is going to be difficult is going to come down to the physicality, because I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if Van was having success, if he was winning the majority of the fight, and then all of a sudden Pantoja landed a big shot, a big left hand, a big body kick, or something like that, and hurt or possibly even finished Van not too long after that. We saw it in the Charles Johnson fight where Joshua Van was winning with the majority of that fight. He was having a lot of success, but it only took one uppercut to completely change the course of the fight, and of course Charles Johnson was able to find the finish at that point. And I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a very similar thing in this fight for Alexandre Pantoja. So as I mentioned before, I do think this fight is going to be a lot closer than the odds suggest. I do think this fight is going to be a lot closer than a lot of fans suggest, and I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if Van is able to stop takedowns, keep the fight on the feet, and win the fight. But at the same time, if I had to give my official prediction for this matchup, I still would slightly lean towards Alexandre Pantoja. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think Alexandre Pantoja is going to defend his belt at UFC 323, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these two videos popping up now. And until the next time, peace out, guys.